All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going deep into the economic engine of the ancient world. We're going to unpack the systems, the routes, and just the sheer scale of the commerce that made the Indian subcontinent a global superpower for, get this, over 1,500 years.
So let's start with the big question. Why on earth was this region so legendary for its wealth? For centuries, explorers like Columbus and Vasco da Gama, they weren't just sailing off into the sunset for fun. They were desperately trying to find new routes to this place, this famed land of riches. So, what was the secret? What made it the ultimate destination for the entire world?
To figure that out, we're going to take a 5-part journey. First, we'll explore the lure of the so-called Golden Land. Then we'll map out the ancient highways of commerce. We'll meet the actual architects of trade, see the treasures the world was clamoring for, and finally, we'll put some absolutely staggering numbers to this story.
Okay, let's get into our first section, the lure of the Golden Land. We're going to explore these names that completely captured the world's imagination. Swaranbhumi, which means the land of gold, and Swarandeep, the Golden Island. And I'm telling you, this wasn't just some flowery poetry. It was a reputation built on immense, very tangible wealth.
And look, this wasn't just a local boast. This reputation was globally recognized. Ancient travelers from all over, Greece, China, Persia, people like Megasthenes, Phrygian, and Al-Biruni, they all wrote about the incredible prosperity they saw with their own eyes. Their accounts, again and again, describe a land of just astonishing wealth.
So, what was the engine driving this golden reputation? It wasn't just about having natural resources. It was a highly sophisticated economic system, a really intricate network of trade and commerce that was, for its time, pretty much the most advanced on the entire planet. Let's see how they built it.
Which brings us right to our second section, the highways of ancient commerce. If the economy was the engine, then you can think of these trade routes as the arteries and veins, just pumping goods, wealth, and ideas across continents.
Trade in the subcontinent really thrived along two main paths. On land, you had the legendary Silk Route. Now, it didn't just carry silk, it was the main highway for business between India, China, and all the way west to Rome. And then, by sea, you had this bustling network of maritime routes connecting the subcontinent's many ports to the Far East, the Middle East, and on to Europe.
Now, this whole network was anchored by these incredible cities, thriving hubs of manufacturing, finance, you name it. So let's take a quick tour of the key players, the commercial centers that really powered this ancient economy.
First up, Pataliputra, which was modern-day Patna. This was way more than just a commercial town. It was a major global supplier of precious and semi-precious stones, which were one of the key luxury goods driving all of this international trade.
And then you've got Peshawar, sitting at this incredibly strategic crossroads. It was a vital hub for exporting wool and, really importantly, for importing powerful war horses from Central Asia, a huge military asset. It was a linchpin in the whole India-China-Rome trade triangle. And right nearby was Taxila. This wasn't just another stop on the trade route, it was a sophisticated center of finance. I mean, think of it as a city of commercial banks. And it was also home to the famous Taxila University, a hub for both commerce and knowledge.
As we move south, we hit Mathura, a true marketplace for the entire subcontinent. You had all these trade routes from the south coming together right here, making it this critical junction for goods flowing north and south.
And of course, Varanasi. Perfectly located on the Gangetic route, it was an absolute powerhouse of the textile industry. We're talking beautiful gold silk cloth and that exquisite sandalwood workmanship.
Over on the west coast, you had Surat. It was the main port for Western trade, especially during the Mughal period. It was famous for its textiles with these intricate gold borders, known as zari, which were in super high demand all over the world.
And finally, down in the south, you had absolute marvels like Kaveripada. I mean, this wasn't just a port, it was a scientifically constructed city, literally engineered for global commerce. It had advanced facilities for handling goods traded with Southeast Asia and China. Seriously, next-level stuff.
So we've seen the routes and we've seen the cities, but who were the people making it all happen? And what kind of innovations did they come up with? Well, that brings us to Section 3, the architects of trade. We're looking at the brains behind the whole operation.
The backbone of this entire economy was a super vibrant merchant class. These folks were into everything: agriculture, handicrafts, you name it. A lot of this work happened in family-based workshops they called karkhanas. And here's the key part. They reinvested their extra income, which just fueled more growth and led to this really sophisticated, homegrown banking system.
But wait a minute. Think about the logistics here. Merchants are moving goods across thousands of miles, on routes that are filled with danger. How in the world could you transfer large payments safely? I mean, carrying around chests full of gold and silver was just asking for trouble. The answer was an absolutely ingenious financial tool called the hundi. It was basically an early version of a bill of exchange, a written contract that let you transfer money without physically moving any currency. This was a revolutionary tool for financing trade. So how did it work? It was beautifully simple. A merchant would go to a trusted banker, a shroff, and deposit some money. The banker would issue a hundi, basically a written promise of payment. The merchant could then travel, maybe hundreds of miles away, show that hundi to the banker's agent in another city, and boom, the agent would pay out the cash. It was secure, it was efficient, and it cut the risk way, way down. And this system was incredibly sophisticated. There were different kinds of hundis for different needs. A Darshani hundi, for instance, was payable on site, kind of like a modern demand draft. But the most fascinating one, in my opinion, was the Jokhimi hundi. It was drawn against goods that were being shipped, and get this, if those goods were lost on the way, the person who issued the hundi took the loss. It was a financial tool with insurance built right in, a concept that was centuries ahead of its time. So, this incredible financial system was all built to move goods. What exactly were these treasures that the rest of the world was just clamoring for? Well, in our fourth section, let's look at the actual stuff, the commodities, that made the subcontinent a global magnet for trade.
The most crucial point here is that the subcontinent maintained what economists today call a favorable balance of trade. All that means is its exports were worth way more than its imports. It was selling high-demand, high-value processed goods to the world, and in return it was just piling up wealth, especially gold and silver.
And the diversity of what they were exporting was just staggering. We're talking spices that were literally worth their weight in gold back in Europe. Dyes like indigo, staples like sugar, and of course those legendary cotton and silk textiles. The subcontinent was exporting high-value goods that the rest of the world just could not get enough of.
And what did they get in return? Well, imports were mainly strategic things, like war horses, some luxury items, some raw materials. But the biggest import by far was payment for that massive trade surplus. A steady, constant river of gold, silver, and copper flowing in from all around the world.
So, when you put all of this together, the roots, the innovations, the goods, you create something truly remarkable. And that brings us to our final section, the ancient superpower. Let's put some hard numbers to this story so we can really grasp the sheer scale of this economic dominance.
We're kind of coming full circle now, right back to those ancient travelers we talked about at the start. It turns out their accounts weren't exaggerations. They repeatedly, consistently talked about the immense prosperity they were seeing with their own eyes. But just how prosperous was it?
Let's start with this number, 32%.
So according to the work of economic historian Angus Maddison, in the 1st century AD, the Indian subcontinent is estimated to have made up nearly a third of the entire global economy. Let that sink in. It was, by a huge margin, the biggest economy in the world.
Okay, now let's jump forward 16 centuries, all the way to the year 1700. The number is still just staggering, 25%.
That was the subcontinent's share of the world's total industrial output. Even as late as 1700, it was the workshop of the world, producing a quarter of all manufactured goods. This just shows you the incredible staying power of its economy.
This timeline really puts it into perspective. Just look at that dominance, holding steady for over 1,000 years. Even in 1700, it's nearly 25%. But then you see this dramatic decline. By 1870, it's down to single digits. So, what happened?
The source material points to a really pivotal turning point, the consolidation of the British Empire's rule over India. This moment marked a fundamental restructuring of the entire economy of the subcontinent.
This slide shows the complete reversal. The economy was transformed from being the world's leading exporter of high-value manufactured goods into an exporter of raw materials. That raw cotton was shipped off to Britain, made into textiles in new factories, and then sold back to the very market it originally came from.
So let's wrap this all up. We started with a simple enough question.
Why was this place called the Land of Gold?
And I think the answer is pretty clear. It was a complete, powerful economic engine. It had vast trade routes, super dynamic merchant communities, sophisticated financial tools like the hundi that were centuries ahead of their time, and it made goods the entire world wanted. The result? Over 1,500 years of commanding a massive share of global wealth. The Land of Gold wasn't a myth, it was an economic reality.
Which leaves us with one final thought. As we look back at this history of sophisticated finance, global supply chains, and value-added exports, what can this ancient legacy of commerce teach us about building a prosperous economy today? Thanks for watching.